So one thing that we did when we started changing the direction of how we're going to produce the feed for our farm was to chop corn. And in the beginning, we had this, for the first 5 years, we chopped the corn in the field that we grew it, just because of financial and time and restrictions because of the guy that we hired to chop. It just is what worked out. So in order for us to get the corn back to the farm and fed year round, we had to haul it every day to almost every other day. And the reason for that is because once you open a bag of corn up or feed up, you have to take off, at least a foot. Every day you need to feed off to keep the feed fresh, because once it's exposed to oxygen or the air, it's going to start to spoil and go bad, and the cows are not going to eat the bad feed. So we got a small, I can't even remember the type, doesn't matter now, but I think we ended up going through four silage feed wagons. So we buy the silage self-unloading wagon. So with the wagons, they would have a bed chain in them, which would bring the feed to the front of the wagon. And then the front of the wagon would have things called beaters, 2 or 3 rows of beaters, which then would knock the feed down onto a tray chain, which then with that chain would bring the feed out to the side of the wagon. Some of them have little augers too. And then that would be unloaded into or for us anyways, it would be unloaded onto a conveyor belt, and then would be dumped into our self-loading feed cart, and that would be the process. So the wagon, we cut the wagon down. So we'd buy a silage wagon. If it had a roof on it, we would cut it off, because we only had a little Ford tractor, a little 43 horse tractor. I can't remember the model number of it, but it only had a reach it could only reach so high, obviously. So we used that to load the corn. We left that tractor over at the ag bags all the time. And that's how we loaded out the corn. So this field was located 8 miles away from our farm, and with agricultural equipment, wagons and stuff, they always are swaying back and or side to side, just because the running gears they get worn out, and you can't get any real speed on them. So if you get a wagon you go 30 miles an hour with, then you're doing, that's great. You're doing amazing. So the round trip typically took us 2 hours, 2.5 hours every day or every other day to get the feed back to the farm. And it worked. I mean, it wasn't the best thing out there, but it worked. But doing so, typically when the weather is beautiful, we could get into the field and get out, no problem, with our pickup trucks and stuff, and wouldn't have to fight through any mud. You can get right up the ag bag, the tractor would start, everything would be it just worked, right? But most of the time it's not like that. So in the fall, when the rains start to come, it would then become we would need to make sure we'd have a 4-wheel drive truck, or we'd have to leave the wagon at the road, walk in, get the tractor, hook up to it with the tractor, and then bring it in. And we ended up putting these ag bags probably 600-700 feet off the road, because The reason for that was because it was closer to the couple houses, so then this way there would be it would discourage like rodents and birds and stuff from making a mess with the ag bags or like raccoons or anything like that. And then also because they were out of sight, out of mind, it would also deter anybody that would want to like cut one of these bags on us or stuff like that. And in the spot that we bagged them, it was also a kind of a higher location, so that way they didn't like weren't sitting in water or anything like that. So in the fall, it started to get a little bit muddy. You had to drive in fast. You know, you would just gun it until you get to where you need to get to. And what was crazy is, so you can get from the road and like the first 100 feet or less, a little less, was kind of a low spot. So then there'd be water that'd pool there, and then you get around this little bend in the field. Then there'd be another low spot, be more water. So it's always just kind of like zipping through and in and out of the field. The winters were always annoying because we had to make sure we plow our way in. It was a big open field, so it drifted very easily. You have to make sure you always plow it. You got heavy snow. You get stuck all the time. Just fighting with it. And then thankfully we had one of the neighbors over there. They were willing to allow us to plug our little tractor in because it had a block heater on it. So this way in the dead of the winter, when it was 30 below or 20 below, the cows still got to eat, we still got to roll. Our tractor would fire up. And so in order to pull just hauling this corn off year round, we had to make sure that we had to fight through the cold, the rain, the snow, the ice, breakdowns, whenever that happens as well. And then also had it always fit it in between. We always had to fit it in between doing our crops when the weather is beautiful and so on and so forth. All what that meant for us is we had to get started. Typically we would leave the farm to go get a load of corn around 3 o'clock in the morning, so we'd be back by 5. So then this way the cows can be fed. This way then we can get the milking done, get everything be out of the barn by 8-9 o'clock, so then we can go to the field and do cropping. So another challenge was we had to fit this consistent trip in year round. And then we had to deal with, obviously if there's a massive snowstorm, we're still out there rolling. There's many times where there's ice storms and stuff like that. We were going, gotta go get a load of feed because, well, that's what we chose to do. And so we had to fight through the road conditions year round, the flat tires we had on the sides of the road, and then traffic. Unfortunately, more and more people, they don't understand that we can only go so fast, or we're in the other person's way, so then they get impatient with us. Like, just a lot of other little variables and factors. And then there was one year there was a bridge that we'd always go over in order to get to the field. And then for I think a year and a half, they ended up having to do bridge work on it and shut the bridge down. So what that meant for us is we had to go, the detour was an additional 4 miles each way. So for a year and a half, we were then running, instead of running 16 miles, we were running 24 miles every day. And it doesn't sound like much more, but when you're only going 20 to 30 miles an hour, whether you're empty or loaded, that time adds up significantly. And we did this for 5 years until we finally were able to make the change to get the corn back to the farm. Part of that was we were fortunate to pick up some more land that was close to the farm. We can grow corn on it, and then it was a much shorter haul to get the corn bagged at the farm. So we were extraordinarily thankful when that happened. But then what also happened while we're hauling all this corn is there was times when the silage wagon would break down, the corn silage wagon. So then what we would do is use a pickup truck, and we would load the pickup truck up with a ton of corn or so every day, haul that back to the farm, and then we would shovel that corn off the truck by hand onto the elevator and then run it into the feed cart. And then there was times when we also used our round bill wagons are just flatbed wagons. So then we would also use a flat wagon, load that up with corn, and then bring that back to the farm, and then we'd do the same thing. I would just stand on the wagon, pitchfork, and shovel the corn onto the elevator. Always made for a great workout just because of the physical demand on it. So in order for us to get the corn side, we've done everything I'd say possible we could do the hard way to get to the point where things are easier. Because I remember, so when I was back in high school, I did the same thing. We bought feed from the same farmer who chopped our corn, but what we did at the time is, instead of buying a self-unloading silage wagon, which would have been smart to do it then, but we didn't. I had built myself a small box wagon. I had like 4-foot sides or so off the running gear, so that way the farmer could load it with his skid steer. And so when we bought haylage and some corn silage, I would then hop onto the wagon. There'd be a door on the side, and then I would pitchfork and shovel all that feed off the wagon. And then I would there would be a white hand cart next to the door, would shovel it into the door or into the cart. Then we get off the wagon and push the cart down the sides of the barn, and then there was a specific way to dump it, and then we'd spread the feed out by hand. And it took 6 carts a side, so it typically took if we were like really hustling, just going like, trying to sprint, I could get it done in I think it was like 35 minutes, but I think most of the time it took 45 minutes to feed the barn. So I did that through high school. And so then when we were able to, over the time I took the farm over, we were able to mechanize the entire system to self-unloading feed wagon onto an elevator, into a self-unloading feed cart where you can drive up and down the barn. It was like a dream. And then when we got to the point where, instead of us hauling corn anymore over the road constantly, and then we had the corn at the farm, it turned the feeding of the cows from 2.5 to 3 hours down to 30 minutes total, from loading the corn into the wagon and unloading the wagon and then unloading the feed, which is a crazy amount of time. I don't understand how we did what we did for all those years. How did we get all the work done? But we did it somehow. It's crazy just thinking it back right now, like just the memories of trying to take this little 43 horse tractor with this load of a couple ton of feed, and it's got a 4-wheel drive, but it's not a very heavy tractor. And we're just giving it all we got to pull this wagon through the snow, through everything, through the mud, to get it to the pavement where it was like the safe zone. So it just, honestly, it's crazy what we went through. It was kind of, it was fun, I guess, now looking back at it. Because we were on the road a lot, sometimes in the dark, too. I haven't hauled corn now, as this is what? So 1, 2, 3, 4 years ago? Almost 5 years now was the last time we had to haul corn. To the point now, all we have to do is go to the ag bag. I use the tractor bucket, we dig it out, and we drive up to the wagon, we dump it in the wagon, which is parked stationary in front of the feed elevator, and that's it. It's neat that it's now so simple.